Hello, this is Jennifer Mayo and my professional practice reflection for my teaching for the past 2 years. I feel like I'm in a very unique situation having moved districts during my time in iSmart. For 2013, I spent my time in Lubbock teaching 7th grade math, and for 2014, I have moved to Frisco Independent School District teaching 6th grade math. Some similarities have been the content with the change of TEKS and so many things moving down to 6th grade. But what has been the most different is my clientele of students, parental involvement, and my type of school in general. So with that information, my reflection was very insightful, and I am excited to share what I learned with you. The first thing I want to talk about is constructing the rubric. I work in positives and challenges. So when I first looked at the rubric, I was excited. I do truly believe that the best form of reflection is through some type of rubric. They're fact-based, they're evidence provided, and they really make you think about your teaching, because if you didn't observe something on that rubric in your teaching, you have to ask yourself, why did that not happen? What can I do to add that in for next time? It really makes you question and wonder how you're constructing your lessons. However, with the challenges with this rubric, I found it to be rather lengthy. It was hard to go through all of the pages and all of the categories during the lessons. It was not one size fits all. And rubrics don't always have to be one size fits all, but this one was unique in that I don't think I could apply it to every lesson that I taught, or even 50% of the lessons that I teach. I feel like it was very integrated, which is great, but a lot of my lessons are not integrated. So that leads you to question, should I have more integration, or should I focus more on the math content? Just a question to ponder. And then another challenge was it wasn't very consistent. Sometimes you read it from left to right, highest to lowest, and sometimes you read it from left to right, but lowest to highest. So, kind of having to flip through the pages and know where you were going with what you were doing. So for the rest of this presentation, I am going to be comparing the then and the now. Then referring to Lubbock ISD, and now the present day comparing Frisco ISD. But I want to start with, I feel like I have been two different teachers that really, it's unfair to compare them, because the way I was having to teach in Lubbock was so unique, and the way I'm having to teach in Frisco is unique. When I really look at my reflections, I feel like both districts saw me at my best and my worst, but in different forms and in different ways. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time going more in depth about how both districts saw me at my best and my worst, and in what different ways. So the first thing we're going to look at is the rubric comparisons. Again, comparing Lubbock ISD and Frisco ISD. The first thing I want to talk about is in the assessment and application phases of both lessons. For Lubbock, I felt like I was in the assimilation. It was very teacher-driven. It was organized by myself, and I was kind of guiding the students and making connections for them. Whereas in Frisco, it was more application. The students were able to make the connections on their own. For the inquiry in Lubbock, it was very guided. It was very structured, whereas in Frisco, it was very guided. I do believe that part of that has to do with classroom management, which I'm going to get more into here in a moment. In Lubbock, I was very teacher active. In Frisco, I'm more student active. Again, direct reflection of student discipline and student management. I felt like in Lubbock, I had to have my thumb on my students, and I had to direct every moment of every class. Whereas in Frisco, I can have more, I can release the reins a little bit and have more student involvement. One thing that was consistent was my level of NOS. I do feel like it was low. It was a level 1 for both districts, which is something that really makes me reflect on myself as a teacher. How can I include more of that in my lessons? Another interesting fact, in Lubbock, I had a level 3 use of technology, which was high, whereas in Frisco, I have a level 1 use of technology. It's very low. A lot of that is the districts. In Lubbock, they provided you with technology, as in Frisco, we have a document camera, and that's about it. But another comparison that's the same for Lubbock and Frisco is my questioning and use of instructional time. I relate that to what I learned in Lubbock. We went through a lot of professional developments on questioning and maximizing instructional time. So I feel like I brought that. That's a good thing I brought from Lubbock to Frisco. But again, back to that classroom management piece, I felt like because of my classroom management, I had low student engagement in Lubbock, whereas in Frisco, I've got a much higher student engagement. And then another thing that has remained the same is the low argumentation. And I think that's, again, a way of me teaching. That's hard for me to give that over. I want to be in control, and so I present the question and then want the students to evaluate it and come up with solutions. But again, another similarity would be the differentiation. I feel like I'm strong in both areas of that, in both districts. And then the final piece to the rubric that I looked at was the learning environment. And this is where Lubbock and Frisco saw the best and worst of me. In Lubbock, it was a very teacher-guided learning environment. Back to classroom management, back to students' low prior knowledge. I felt like I had to guide them through everything, and that was a low point for me with teaching. However, in Frisco, it's a very learner-guided learning environment where I facilitate, but the students are the ones doing the most learning and being the most active in the lesson. So that's where Frisco sees me at my best. Now, the critical friends lesson I felt like was just completely different from the other two lessons. It wasn't like a typical lesson. I did feel like it was the only lesson that incorporated integration. And it did have a level 2 of NOS, which I was excited about, but it was my most challenging lesson, but the one I learned the most from. So I really want to take the pieces of the critical friends and apply that to my future lessons. Why was it most challenging? Because it got me out of my comfort zone. It made me work harder and really incorporating and other subjects. And so how can I do that in other lessons? Now I want to go back and talk about the dilemmas across Lubbock and Frisco. So with your conceptual dilemmas, Lubbock saw me and Lubbock let me think like a constructivist teacher. What did my students need and how could I meet their needs? Whereas in Frisco, it is very much what do they need to know to pass the test and get commended on the test. We hear STAR. I hear the word STAR a whole lot more in Frisco than I did in Lubbock. Pedagogical dilemmas. In Lubbock, I felt like I had to make the connections for the students, show the connections for the students. We had a hand signal for it. We talked about it all the time. I had to really make all my lessons relevant so that the students had some buy-in. I had to push them to think critically. It was not something they wanted to do. I had low student self-discipline for higher order questioning. They didn't like them. If they felt like they couldn't do it, they gave up. Whereas in Frisco, it's the complete opposite. The students are making the connections between learning. They want those harder problems. They enjoy critical thinking. It's what's fun for them. In fact, their behavior, they act out if they feel like the lesson is too easy for them. Cultural dilemmas. Another key point to why this year of teaching has kind of rocked my world. In Lubbock, I had a lack of community resources, a lack of parental involvement. They just really didn't understand what resources were available, how they could help their student, and the lack of success among years and years and years in the family. The kids felt defeated by the time they got to school. However, in Frisco, community involvement is huge, parental involvement huge. They're already college focused. The parents come in and they want to know how their kid can take 6th grade math, but how can we get them advanced enough to be in algebra by 8th grade so that they can be taking calculus in high school. It's a history of success. But I truly see the high pressure and the testing anxiety for these students. They are second guessing themselves so much that they are making themselves physically sick. And then political dilemmas, talking about not just the state and having to teach what we have to teach when we have to teach it, but about the communities. Lubbock, what do you need to do to have those students show growth? How can you teach them? Use your creativity, use your imagination, engage those students. Whereas in Frisco, they are about growing students and we advance each child, but how can we make them be commended? And did you teach what was provided for you? Those are the key things. We gave you this resource. Did you use it? So in the end, when I think about, am I a constructivist teacher? I felt like Lubbock saw the best of me as a constructivist teacher. I was building upon student knowledge. I had clear goals. I had interactive lessons. However, I was teacher-centered. But in Frisco, while I am student-centered and building upon student knowledge, those lessons are not as engaging. It is more sit and get because the students, the more problems I can give them, the happier they are. They like to discover and discuss. Again, I just feel like I'm missing that interactive piece. So with best practices for teaching, what I've learned the most is you have to teach to your personality. You have to have a drive to want to be better as a teacher. Reflect, reflect, reflect. That's where that rubric comes in. And don't be afraid of change. Each year you can grow and you can become a better teacher. Make that year the best year yet, and then the next year improve upon that. And then finally, collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. That is what I've learned the most from iSmart. I have gotten so many new ideas and ways of thinking from all of our educators in our program. And the best practice for student learning, student-centered lessons, they have got to be the center. They have got to be the ones formulating the questions, answering the questions. Focus on your class period, not on the day, but on each class period. What do they need to do to understand the lesson and to perform at their maximum potential? Understanding that learning is not one size fits all. Making those connections daily, building upon prior knowledge, and then showing kids how to bridge that gap. Talking about how we are going from what they learned in 5th grade and how we're going to apply it in 6th grade and then into 7th grade. And then finally, model, model, model. We cannot get away from those models. They are still conceptual learners and they need to see those pictures. So in summary, teaching at my best. Last year, I was a better constructivist teacher. However, this year, I'm a better student-centered teacher. So my main question to ponder is, how do I combine these two? How do I combine my constructivist teaching that I felt like I excelled at last year with interactive lessons, engaging lessons, meeting students at where they were, with being a student-centered teacher this year? That is what I'm reflecting on the most, and I feel like that is what this project really brought to my attention and helped summarize. I have been searching all year as to what is so different. Why is this year so different from last year? And I feel like going through the rubric and truly looking at my Lubbock Independent School District teaching and my Frisco Independent School District teaching, that's what I've realized. That I was constructivist last year, but that I'm student-centered this year, but a little bit more, too much sit and get. How can I combine those two? So I feel like with having that thought in my mind, going into next semester, with that being my main question, how can I combine these two? When I sit and plan lessons, I'm going to be able to truly look at my constructivist teaching style from Lubbock and apply it to this year. And I feel like my students are going to get my best teaching, my best personality, and some of my best lessons yet to come. So thank you for this assignment. It was a great assignment. I really enjoyed reflecting on my teaching, and I look forward to becoming the next best teacher and making this year the best yet.